From the newsroom of ImpactAlpha, I'm Monique Aiken, and this is your Impact Briefing for Friday, January 6th. Happy New Year, everyone! Today, I'm joined by ImpactAlpha's Rudy Senatus, plus the founders of Dollaride, Sanni and Chris Coles. The Brooklyn-based ride-hailing company is providing green transportation solutions and jobs for communities in New York City's transit deserts. Hi, guys. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Monique. Thanks for having us.
Hey,
Happy to be here,
happy to
Monique.
be here.
Great. But first, we wanted to catch you up on ImpactAlpha's look-aheads to 2023, which are outside the paywall on ImpactAlpha.com. They're a great way to track the year's emerging trends and sample what ImpactAlpha has to offer. Policy progress last year sets up climate action this year, Amy Cortese reports. Amy will be tracking the implementation of the landmark climate bill, the Inflation Reduction Act. In particular, the deployment of early-stage technologies at scale is going to be key. In a guest post on ImpactAlpha, Nate Lobier-Lewis of Spring Lane Capital writes that, quote, "We need a new crop of entrepreneurs who think of themselves first and foremost as project developers." Our emerging markets reporter, Jessica Pothering, predicts 2023 will see a rising tide of local investors in emerging markets that are building local ecosystems and crafting local policies for long-term sustainable economic development. These agents of impact are tired of waiting for outsiders to fulfill long-standing development promises and have realized they don't need to. Dennis Price rounded up our coverage of the Inclusive Economy Beat. One big takeaway: investors able to spot underappreciated opportunities and identify entrepreneurial talent overlooked by other investors can outperform the market. We'll also be looking at how the stable asset class of municipal bonds can drive social impact goals. And in a year that ESG became a hot button issue, David Banks says that the metrics are starting to help identify who the leaders ushering in an economy built around sustainability, inclusion, and equity are, from the laggards trying to block it. A key metric to watch is revenue materiality, the share of a company's revenue that comes from tangible solutions to identifiable societal challenges. And it's another month, so we have another list of impact funds in fundraising mode. This month's list, in partnership with Realize Impact, features 7 open funds, including WIC Capital in Senegal, which is leveraging the investment power of women in business to support women entrepreneurs. Short for Women's Investment Club, WIC's network of Senegalese businesswomen invest their own capital alongside institutional investors. Check out the rest of the list at ImpactAlpha.com. So first things first, Rudy, your story this week started on Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn.
Yes, Monique. I live about 2 miles away from my parents, pretty much straight down Flatbush, and I take dollar vans pretty much every week to go see them. Um, for those of our listeners who don't know, dollar vans are, these minivans that go along fixed routes in Brooklyn and in Queens and even in Manhattan's Chinatown, right? And so you get on these, minivans or little minibuses. You pay the driver $2, and he takes you along a fixed route, and they go back and forth, for example, on Flatbush Avenue. Um, and Low income communities and minority communities and immigrant communities in the Brooklyn area and in the Queens area rely on this type of transportation to go to work, to bring their kids to school. I remember in college, this was how I got to and from school. And so this is what this amazing informal transit network does.
Yeah, and those areas are not well served by existing transportation and infrastructure like the MTA, at least in New York City, for example. And is that partly what drew you to this story?
Yes, that's why I was interested in this story when I met Sue at an Urban X event last month. Um, he told me about the Dollar Van's electrification program, and the collaboration with the different players in it, including Build Edison, Hevo, and Black Power.
Well, Black Power is a friend of the show. Donnell Baird has been on here with us a couple of times.
Yes, and the same way that Black Power is retrofitting buildings and low income and minority communities across the country, um, Dollaride is taking on a similar strategy to retrofit dollar vans in this little informal economy.
So, Sue, tell us about this electrification model, how your retrofitting works, and more importantly, how does the financing part work?
Sure. Really similar to how Donnell from Block Power talks about, they turn buildings into Teslas. We're trying to do the same thing with dollar vans and informal transit. So I jokingly say we're turning dollar vans into Teslas. But the main idea here is that, you know, uh, fleet owners or really any buyer of an electric vehicle stands to save a lot of money on gas and maintenance and other aspects of owning a gas powered vehicle. But when you go electric, you reap all these benefits. So I thought it made a lot of sense to bring those same opportunities and benefits to dollar vans. I grew up in Brooklyn and in Queens where dollar vans are popular, and it occurred to me that we could bring those same savings and have a similar environmental impact if we provided a platform that made it easy to go electric for dollar van fleet owners.
Anything to add, Chris?
Sure. So, as you know, we are working with a few different partners on this. Um, a vehicle manufacturer that's actually going to be retrofitting the vehicles. We'll also be working with a charging partner, Hevo, and they're going to be taking care of all the charging needs, as well as a financing partner who's working to kind of secure the debt financing, Hebo. So Dollaride, in a sense, is really organizing and working with all of these different vendors to provide a solution that can really take F owner's fleet from all gas to entirely electric.
So, Dollaride started with a digitization strategy to help drivers, but what's the origin story of the idea? What problem were you solving, and how did you come to this concept?
Yeah, when we first started Dollaride, Chris and I collaborated and basically started from our own experiences trying to take dollar vans and realizing that, for us who are familiar with the service, it was relatively easy to know where drivers were, where the routes were located, and how far along you can go. But for people who are uninitiated, for people who have no idea how to use a dollar van, this could be really intimidating, or in fact, like almost impossible, because traditionally things like dollar vans don't publicize their services. There's no advertising. There are no fixed routes or schedules. So it's usually knowledge from the community or through word of mouth that people hear about how to use these services. So as technologists, Chris, having been an engineer and worked at startups for nearly a decade, and myself, being in a similar position as an entrepreneur, we thought we could build a solution that would make the dollar van ecosystem digital, but therefore more transparent to new people who could also leverage the service. So that's exactly what we set out to do when we started Dollaride, and really dreamt of the idea back in like 2017, 2018. So, it's taken us a couple of years to get the digital platform ready. But once we started seeing that there was adoption and that it was actually working, we knew we were onto something great. And, electrification seemed like the next frontier that would make an even bigger impact.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not sure, how much you all know about Sue's family's background, but Sue actually grew up very close to the industry. So, Sue's uncles were actually fleet owners themselves. So, from a young boy, Sue has kind of grown up in this industry and knows a lot of the problems and challenges, owners and drivers face. So, over 5 years ago when we started first working on Dollaride, we were able to leverage a lot of that experience to have an unfair advantage to really have, a pretty good strategy in how we were going to, provide value for these drivers and these fleet owners.
As we always like to talk about getting proximate, you were born into it, and it was all around you. You were both the one of the well, knew both the supply side, and you also were a writer, and so that unique insight is really important. But there's beyond that kind of impact that you're having directly on the electrification side of things. What about your consumers, the customers, the people who are the riders? How do you think this will solve some of their problems?
One of the things that we've learned is that the consumer or riders really need to be a part of the solution in an intimate way. So, as we approach this whole electrification project, we've built into our plan a lot of time and effort into like community engagement and community development. So essentially, we want the riders and local community stakeholders to let us know where there should be more dollar vans or more routes that can serve the community. Um, but we've learned overall that people really enjoy dollar vans for a lot of reasons. Not only does it help you get from point A to point B, more quickly or efficiently than the MTA in a lot of areas around New York City, I think people generally just enjoy being customers of their fellow neighbors and their own countrymen. A lot of the communities we serve are, immigrant enclaves in local communities that where people come from the same ethnic and cultural backgrounds. So it generally feels good to, hop in a vehicle that's owned by, someone who reminds you of your uncle, or someone who, or you're a driver and you're driving people around who look like your family members. So I think that's what makes dollar vans and things like them special. And we want to stay true to that, and because of that we really want to incorporate the community into how we build out our own programs and our software and our products.
I love that community aspect, and I think of the times that you hop on a on a dollar van and you see somebody you know. It is also a way to connect the community with itself. But you mentioned something in the piece that sometimes the best equipment and technology don't get to our communities. How are you basically visibilizing something else with this project, and particularly with the partners that you have aligned yourself with?
Well, we specifically chose our corporate partners like Block Power, Build Edison, and Hevo, because they are actually at the forefront in their own respective domains when it comes to clean energy, electrification, and helping pursue this energy transition. So, for example, Hevo actually has like a very innovative patent pending wireless and plug-in charging product. So if you can imagine, dollar van drivers will be able to charge their vehicles wirelessly in the same way that you can charge your iPhone wirelessly through like one of these fancy chargers. That's something that for lack of a better term, like what rich companies or rich organizations get to have. But we partnered with people who saw the vision and who are also New York based companies and realized that they want to support this whole initiative that we have and uplift the communities that we're serving. So I just thought it was really important to bring the best and brightest that we could muster up. So I'm fortunate that Block Power, Hevo, Bill Edison, and many other organizations are really playing their role in that fight.
So, Rudy, you got out and took some rides over the holiday break and talked to some drivers. What did you find out from your on the ground reporting?
What I heard from all the drivers was that gas prices are an issue, but insurance is the bigger issue. Um, they told me that they struggle to uh, to pay for insurance just because insurance the rates are so high. And um, for example, I spoke to Fatai Lassisi this week actually, who is this 70, he's about to be 70 years old. He joked during our conversation, and he shared that he started back in 1982 and as a driver, and he still drives, but now he owns his own fleet. And some of the drivers that he works with, um, are taking a break just because they don't know how they're going to be able to deal with the insurance costs, especially as rates are expected to rise again this upcoming March.
Yeah, I'd love to share some insight into that, because this was one of the challenges that we faced and that we continue to hear from drivers and fleet owners. And it became really obvious to us that there's no way for us to implement a tech solution like, a fully digital dollar van experience, or even, electrify fleets, if we don't really help deal with the issues that are most pressing and top of mind for fleet owners today. So to share some details about, our whole electrification effort, ultimately, we're providing a fleet of vehicles that will come with charging stations uh, and financing in case there's a driver or fleet owner who simply wants the capital to, retrofit his own vehicle. But, ultimately, Dollaride is providing a set of vehicles that will be available on demand to any fleet owner or any driver who wants to use them. But probably more importantly, we're working on a scheme where the cost of insurance and maintenance are going to be taken care of by Dollaride. So if you can imagine, just like when you rent a car, um, you don't really think about buying insurance just for those 2 or 3 days that you rent a car. We're going to have insurance baked into the cost of renting a vehicle for a day, a week, a month, or however long a driver or fleet owner wants it. So, we figured there are ways that we can make the cost of insurance cheaper or even invisible to drivers and fleet owners by using our partnership with Block Power and, banks and other institutions, that I think at the end of the day will make a big impact on the pockets of drivers and fleet owners. So conceptually, that's the goal. And I'm happy to say that we've made a lot of progress towards that with the partners that we have. So I'm really excited about rolling this out in 2023 and the years beyond.
No, I think that's awesome. The bundling will definitely make it much more effective for the drivers themselves. But the last question is, what about your plans to scale? Are you moving to any other cities soon? Where to next for you guys?
Well, it's funny. I get this question often, and it's sometimes hard to think about, what other cities are we going to go to when I'm so focused on New York City, and the drivers and communities that we're already familiar with. But if you think about it, things like dollar vans and jitneys exist all around the country and all around the world, especially in quote unquote developing countries or the emerging markets. So, proximity wise, we could easily be in Jersey City, in 2024, where there's a whole network of quote unquote jitneys, but they work effectively the same way as dollar vans in Brooklyn and Queens do. And in Miami, there's a whole network of jitneys there that are, actually run by the Haitian community. So, I think the things that we're learning in New York, especially where we have similar this cultural melting pot, gives us a lot of insight into how to work with other communities outside of New York. But, it's probably maybe 18 months away to where we could have another deployment in another city. So that's probably what's ahead of us right now.
Well, I love it. I wish you all the best, and let me know when you're heading to Jamaica.
Will do. I
Well,
can't
thanks.
wait for that.
Soon.
I can be part of your rollout team, sure, on the ground. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate having you. Thanks, Rudy, for your story, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you, Monique. Thank you, Rudy.
Thank you all.
And that's going to do it for this week's Impact Briefing. Thanks to Sue, Chris, Rudy, and our producer, Isaac Silk. Ready to try ImpactAlpha? Sign up for ImpactAlpha Open, free of charge, directly at ImpactAlpha.com. Want to go deeper? Grab a subscription and get full access to the site, Agents of Impact calls, and the daily email brief. Just go to ImpactAlpha.com/subscribe and choose an annual subscription. Thank you for listening. I'm Monique Aiken, Managing Director for TIP, the Investment Integration Project. Be sure to check back for next week's briefing, and until then, take care.